This is the burial place of Mary Tudor, Queen of France, and Henry VIII's younger and favourite sister. Born 18th of March 1496, she was the youngest child of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York to survive past childhood. Aged 5, she was engaged to the future Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, but after his uncle kept delaying the marriage, the engagement was called off. Interestingly, Henry VIII would later betroth his own daughter to the same man, and this engagement would also fall through before the actual marriage could take place. Mary Tudor was again engaged at age 18, this time to Louis XII of France, a man 34 years older than her. Mary was reportedly so unhappy with this marriage match that she got her brother Henry, who was now king, to promise to allow her to wed someone of her own choice once her much older future husband died. Not only was Louis older than Mary, he was also ill. He'd been suffering with gout for years that was so bad he had to be carried into the battlefield. Despite his bad health, it's unlikely anyone predicted that the marriage would only last 3 months before Louis XII died. During her short time as Queen of France, her maids of honour included the sisters Mary and Anne Boleyn, who'd been sent to France as teenagers to learn how to be ladies-in-waiting. Mary was kept in France for 40 days after Louis's death to ensure she wasn't carrying an heir to the French throne. However, when they were sure she wasn't, Henry VIII sent his close friend, Charles Brandon, to bring her home to England. Before leaving to collect Mary, Henry VIII had Charles promise that he wouldn't marry Mary, as Henry was aware that Mary was in love with Charles. To this day, it's illegal for those in the line of succession to marry without the monarchy's consent, something that has landed many people in the Tower of London and even got some executed. Despite this and the fact that Charles had promised to Henry he wouldn't do it, Mary and Charles secretly married in France. This was scandalous at the time, as Charles was not at the level of nobility to be able to marry a princess of England. Henry was furious, and some of his men called for Charles to be executed. However, Henry instead allowed them to get remarried with his approval in Greenwich Palace. They didn't get away without punishment though, as Henry fined them the equivalent of millions of pounds in today's money, including Mary having to hand over all of her dowry from her first marriage and the valuable jewels that her late husband had gifted her. Mary and Charles moved to Westhorpe Hall in Suffolk and had 4 children, 2 of which lived to adulthood. Their second eldest child, Frances Brandon, would marry Henry Grey, and they would have 3 daughters together, including Lady Jane Grey, who would one day become the 9-day Queen. Mary was close to her sister-in-law, Catherine of Aragon, so when Henry planned to divorce her, she spoke out in favour of Catherine of Aragon and against Anne Boleyn, making it very clear that she disliked Anne, who she knew personally as she'd been one of her maidens when she was Queen of France. Unfortunately, Mary died soon after this from sweating sickness in 1533 while her husband was away for Anne Boleyn's coronation. She was initially buried in Bury St Edmund's Abbey, but when Henry had the abbey dissolved 5 years later, he had her moved to St Mary's Church. Originally, Mary, Queen of France, did have a tombstone, but in 1784 it was removed and she was reburied in a shallow grave in the same spot of the church. During this process, her coffin was opened and locks of her hair were cut, one of which can still be seen in the Moyes Hall Museum in Bury St Edmunds. Although she no longer has her original tombstone, this beautiful stained glass window was gifted by Queen Victoria to St Mary's Church to celebrate Mary, Queen of France's life.